Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Street lights, people. Oh. Figured I'd at least try to start with something 80s to get things off. And that was, of course, if somebody throws an 80s question at me, that's kind of the first song that I pick. Did it come out in 81, 82, 83? I didn't study up enough on that to remember for this particular episode. But welcome to Julia Pop. And if you haven't heard, the live stream is on 80s fashion. And so even though my 80s fashion isn't completely matchy-matchy, I decided to just grab a few things that I had sitting around the magic room, which is, of course, behind me. I picked a different corner of the magic room to broadcast from, so I figured that would be a little bit fun, too. I know I got Becky Lynch. Hang on, I'm still getting used to how different directions it goes. Still have Becky Lynch over here. I've got a few fashiony things, 80s and 90s fashiony things kind of hanging behind. I did pick a little bit of the checkerboard MTV fashion, of course, and it is a long sleeve, but it is a crop top. So, of course, I decided to have a little bit of fun with that. Believe me, I didn't have time to put my hair up in 80s hair because even if you saw the pictures of all of my 80s old photo looks that I put together, you might notice that my hair didn't puff up as much. And I even joked that the one or two pictures that you see where my hair is poodle fluffy, it didn't last long. So all of you ladies that were able to, the higher the hair, the closer to God, congratulations. You did a whole lot better than me. And my sister could rock completely. Her hair consistency was much better than mine for pulling something like that off. However, ridiculous earrings were absolutely within the correct realm. The neon color, it's a lovely kind of neon yellow green that I'm wearing that does not go with this shirt at all. But who cares? It's not a big deal at all. So like I said, welcome to Julia Pop. Welcome to our theme. Crystal said, yes, that's your sister. Yes, she could just get the highest hair that I've possibly ever seen on anybody. It's pretty darn amazing. So like I said, welcome again to all of you here at Julia Pop. If you're first time here, welcome. If you're millionth time here, welcome also. Please be understood that you are welcome to comment as much as you like. If there's something in the conversation that kind of piques your interest or brings on a question, feel free to ask that as well. If you have any input as well, I'd love to hear your stories too. So it's always fun to think back, and that's kind of what Julia Pop is meant to do. It's meant to be for nostalgia purposes and for fun and for us to reminisce and have a good time talking about all things pop culture. So Inger is here too. Evening, Inger, savior of the universe. I have to at least take a second to tell a short part of the story. I had a wardrobe malfunction, not like Janet Jackson style, but it was definitely stressful nonetheless. And Inger saved the day. She fixed a zipper on my dress, and I am forever grateful. And I am working on a song for repayment for such. And so I hope that I will have that wrapped up, that I can share that with you, Inger, by this weekend. Fingers crossed. So I will do my best to try and get as far as I can. The ideas in the creative brain are swirling around, and so I'm going to do my best for that. So on to our topic. Again, like I said, welcome to all of you. Feel free to comment away as we work our way through 80s fashion. So we're going to talk about, oh, hey, Karen, hello. She says, hello, Julia. Hello, back to you, Karen. We're going to talk about 80s fashion. So men's fashion, women's fashion, the androgynous nature of both directions of that dressing, as well as makeup, as well as all of the influences that led us to be as brave and bold and colorful as we ended up being in the 80s. So without any further ado, and with a reminder that you are welcome to please chat as often as you want, or if you, like I said, if you have any questions or comments, please bring them up in the chat so we can keep the conversation going. You may notice I am on my own this time. I do not have a peanut gallery, so that means that all of you on the comments need to become my peanut gallery to help me out. Stephen, I almost thought I had him talked into it because I'm like, well, there's men's fashion and there's women's fashion. We can talk about it all, but he's off busy gaming anyway. So and to be quite honest with you, when you do Run Fest, you kind of get worn out and you need recovery time. The older we get, the longer it takes us to do recovery. So, which is why, kind of why I plan to put this on Tuesdays and not on Mondays. And I mean, I watch wrestling on Mondays anyway. So, but yes, and I did make sure that I had a nice, shiny, glossy lip because I did that a lot in the 80s as well. All right, so the history of 80s fashion, there's not really a whole lot. I mean, it's just a 10-year decade. But when 1980 spun around, it was the attitude of all things pop culture, news, everything else was it's a new decade, brand new decade. It's the 80s. We have a new focus. And so we went from the 60s and 70s, which was very much kind of a hippie, kind of a groovy vibe. It was the exit of disco. It was the exit of the whole hippie concept. And we had a new focus on dollars, the whole idea of the power suit, things like that. Now, we also had the advent of cable TV. And so you had more choices and you had more ability to see lots of different things as for what different kinds of fashion were happening at the time. Clive, welcome to you as well. Clive says fashion stopped changing around the 2000s. It's hard to tell TV shows from fashion after that. It's all phone and TV sizes. Lol. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, and it's so interesting that the decades previous almost have their own iconography. It's almost like, hey, dress like you're in the 50s. And there's a very clear codex that says, oh yeah, you wear the leather jacket, you look like you're on Happy Days. You wear the jeans, you roll them up, you wear the white t-shirt, the girl wears poodle skirt, and suddenly you have the 50s. Well, what? We have the same thing when we think about the 80s. We think about MTV logos, we think about bright neon colors, some sparkle, the heavier eye makeup, the glossy lip. We think about all of those things, the really bright, wild colors, the really bright patterns, the really wild patterns. And so we think of those kinds of things whenever we're thinking 80s fashion. So you're absolutely right. And I agree with you. I can't really see an outfit and say, oh, that's 2005 fashion, or that's 2010s fashion, or even 2020s fashion. I haven't quite seen that either. But the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s had something that seemed to stick as a cultural concept on either of those. And so Inger says internet and cable changed so much of how we perceive the world. Yes, because for a long time we just had three channels to work with. And that was where we got our ideas for fashion and for makeup and all of those were the people we looked up to. And of course, my sister Jackie, welcome. She is of course going to remind us about the big hair because like I said before, she had the biggest of the big hair. She could get her hair, she could make that happen, and it was impressive. And for some reason, this crazy mane of mine, I'm very fortunate that I have a good, healthy head of hair. But I don't know if it's the thickness of it, the consistency, whatever it is about my hair, you can get it up there, but not for very long. But Jackie was a miracle worker when it came to hair. She could get it all curled and zhuzhed up. The higher the hair, the closer to God. And so Jackie was a master at it. And Jackie says hi, so hi right back. And so also with the MTV generation, of course, I'm wearing MTV. I have like 8 or 9 of those shirts. So I picked this one. And so it's the MTV generation. It's filled with youth and filled with energy. So Crystal says, fashion is now repeating itself. You can buy bell bottoms right now. And that's something else we'll talk about too. Every couple of decades, you'll have a nostalgia decade that comes back on you. And so we'll talk about that a little bit too. And so, of course, I say the higher the hair, the closer to God. What does Jackie say? Amen. And then Karen says we had one of the first satellite dishes, which was huge. And we went from 3 local channels to every channel possible. And that changed. It changed. It represented a cultural shift on what we could see. And then it opened up a whole world of possibility to us on how we wanted to dress or who we wanted to aspire to look like. And so it changed a lot of things. And so with that visual concept, the 80s just exploded with a different kind of color, a different kind of energy, a new generation. And so, of course, with this, there's plenty of teenage influence. So when you're a teenager, you're exploring style and you're exploring all the different things that you can do. And so to have these kind of things coming through in the fashion world, in the television and movie and music world was a big deal. And so we started emulating how many girls were dressed like Madonna or Cyndi Lauper, how many guys were getting braver and dressing like, say, Rick Springfield, or dressing like in excess or dressing like even Duran Duran. Like makeup was something that boys could still take part in. And so it was really fun to watch how the fashion was just getting really smashed together in a really fun, cool way. And Inger says everything bigger and louder. Amen. That's exactly what was happening in the 80s. And so also within the fashion world and within the textiles world, we have some new fabrics that are really coming into their own at this time. So things like lycra, spandex, these are the fabrics that really informed the look of the 80s. The bike shorts of the world came into vogue, not just as a workout wear, but because we had a workout generation. We were now taking workout wear into leisure wear, into fashion. And so because of that, we were able to really expand what made the 80s fashion into 80s fashion. And so aerobics was coming up and becoming a big deal, jazzercise, all of those different things. Karen has it, yes. She says, my hair was 5 inches tall in the 8th grade. I held the record in English class for a week. That means people were measuring the hair to see if you had the record. That is fantastic. The teacher actually measured the height of the girl's hair. That is when you know you're onto something amazing. Yep, and Inger has it right too. Jazzercise and Jane Fonda. So this was a very big deal, and it bled, that whole concept just bled into the entire fashion world as far as the colors and the fabrics and everything. Now, we also still had denim at this point, and the interesting thing about denim is denim in each decade has its own interesting take, its own shade, its own cut, its own color, everything about it. So in the early 80s, we still have a heavy designer jeans carryover, and it did last well into the 80s. And then, of course, Levi's has always had something when it comes to fashion, when it comes to denim. And so that was a big part of it, too. And so with that history, and I've already mentioned it, I want to go into influences. What exactly were those influences? And I've spoken about it before. We talk a lot on Julia Pop about advertisements, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Advertising is the funhouse mirror that is put up to the world to show us what the advertisers think we want to see. And so it's very back and forth. It's very communication based, but it's also a game of telephone because sometimes things will get a little lost in translation. Sometimes those advertisements are aspirational and maybe we don't quite reach them. So one of the big ads, speaking of designer jeans, was the Calvin Klein Brooke Shields ad. The tight jeans, the very close fit waistline, hip line, straight leg jeans. So we were getting away from the bell bottoms that did make a comeback in the 90s as well. And Crystal says, a link for those who want to see the Bender video shoot when they wrote a song and smashed some 80s fashion in there. Makeup time on the guys was fun. Yes, so my Cut Rock cover band, we were part of a filmmaking project that our lead guitarist is also a filmmaker, still a filmmaker, pretty amazing. His name is Jim Boltus. And he had like a video challenge. So we decided to make a music video out of it. And so it was a comparison of what happened with the 80s and what changed in the 90s. And so what was funny is like the guys grew these really scruffy beards for the 90s portion, which we filmed first. And then we switched back into 80s wear, which we did very hair metal, jacking the hair up, getting everything. I had the side ponytail. I was wearing bright pink, all of it. And so and we went 80s, and then the boys went completely clean shaven, and Crystal, I think, got to help out with putting some makeup on the boys. So the makeup, the boys had some sparkle and the boys had some shine on their faces, and it was amazing and fantastic. And again, we tried to get their hair zhuzhed up just as high as we possibly could. And then Jackie agrees, we loved those Jordache jeans, and again, it was a slim fit, and it was exactly what you see in the Brooke Shields commercials. And she was the beginning of bringing that fashion icon status into jeans, which had been happening in the 70s, but really exploded in the 80s. Yes, Crystal was the one that was really cranking on the makeup for the boys to make them look just as 80s hairband-tastic as possible. Now you have other brands that were doing jeans, but were also doing other fashions such as Versace, such as Guess. And then Levi's, like I said, was changing with the times. So Levi's was a staple in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 1800s, for heaven's sake. And so they figured out a way to keep that fashion in place, and that's exactly what they did. And so when all of a sudden we went from that bell-bottom jean to a taper jean. And sometimes you would taper them so much, we used to fold them over and roll the bottom so that it would be a nice little peg leg on the jeans. So it would grip to your ankle and then just be form-fitting the rest of the way up. And so later on, we had a few things that kind of went a little bit more bag-waisted and a little bit more pleat-waisted, but we'll get to that too. So Levi's had a ton of really great 80s ads. Bongo jeans was another one that had a lot of print advertising. For shoes, we had Capezio shoes. Suddenly it was fashionable to wear your dance shoes out and about when you're just going out, walking around, going to school, whatever. So Capezio really got into that market, even though they had been exclusively a dance shoe. Now they're a dance shoe that you can wear on the street. United Colors of Benetton, another one. They basically just sold sweaters, but their ads were vibrant and would reach out to you and were about equality and about all colors, shapes, and sizes and everything. And so, Kat, welcome to you as well. Kat mentions skinny jeans, some assembly required. Yes, absolutely. So, and Inger says, low heel boots to tuck the jeans in. Yep. So you do the low heel and and sometimes the boots would have like the little fold over on the top of it. Jackie mentioned some other great jean brands. Calvin Klein, Sasson, Gloria Vanderbilt, and Sergio Valente. And of course, she had one of each. Now, I had a couple of pairs of Sassons. I had a pair of Jordache. But then once I hit the mid 80s, I was Levi's on. And almost all of my jeans were all Levi's, either 501s or 505s. And then a lot of times I was getting the ones that were kind of the slimmer fit, and I don't remember what number Levi's those were, but they were there. And of course, Sasson had their own, Sasson and Jordache, all of these jeans campaigns were on ads, and you would see them every weekend on American Bandstand. You'd see them when you were watching Three's Company, Happy Days, all of the different shows that you would watch. You'd see ads for these jeans. And so, ooh la la, Sasson. And Sasson was probably one of my favorites, to the point that I even had a 3/4 shirt that you saw in the pictures that said, ooh la la, Sasson. And it was the 3/4 shirt that, of course, I wore with my Sasson jeans, because you're supposed to. And so then we also had a lot of makeup ads at that time. And so when you're reading through your magazine, you would have the most unforgettable women wear Revlon. And so, of course, it was the supermodels that we know to this very day that became huge in the 80s and was just like an explosion of iconic faces that you would see selling clothes and selling makeup. And Mom, welcome to you as well. Norma June says, absolutely loved those clothes. So Mom was an 80s fan. That's pretty cool to find out. She was a bit of a different decade, but she still was able to enjoy some of those trends as well. And so then we also had, when it comes to makeup, we had CoverGirl, we had Maybelline. These were all classic brands that really came into their own, that really brought the hyped up color, the electric blue, the vibrant yellow, the bright greens, the bright blues, the bright reds and pinks even, and just a rainbow of color coming at you all through the 80s. And then we also had plenty of chapstick commercials and lip gloss commercials and lip slicks and all of those different kinds of lip balms that we would use all the time. Let's see if I'm close enough to one of them so I can show off a little bit of a retro one real quick. I'm pretty sure it's there. Yes, there it is. So from the 70s well into the 80s, and I found these for Christmas time, so I think that Jackie has one of these, but it's the lip licking vintage balm. So even though it has kind of like an old school turn of the century look, it's still just a fabulous little lip balm that they had, of course. And then another one of the throwback, and that's one of the fun things about nostalgia, is that we get things that make comebacks, and if you miss something, then you get to have it back again. So Inger says, I still have my black jeans from college, can't wear them. The measurement difference between now and then are wild. Amen. I still have my prom dress. My prom dress is like a size 7. I haven't been in a size 7 since high school. And then, of course, Jackie said makeup was much simpler back then. Even though we caked it on, it was much simpler. And, of course, now we have setting spray, primer, etc. We did new lipstick, did lip gloss instead. So, yeah, things were definitely very different. Kat mentions, my mom had skin-tight ripped jeans she wore all through the 80s. Yep. Definitely part of all that. Drove my grandfather nuts. He kept trying to throw them away, even though she was a grown-ass woman with 3 kids, still trying to throw away the ripped jeans. Oh, yeah, and we get teased all of the time. And then Jackie brings up, too, the cherry kissing stick. So I did find some of those as well. Let's see if I've got a mini one here. Yes, I do. Awesome. And so we definitely had these, and I found these at a retro shop as well. Hopefully you can kind of see that. It was just a little kissing potion, and it is actually a roller ball at the top. So you can see that was a roller ball. It was a big one for us. And so I bought some of those for Jackie for Christmas as well as for Jillian, my daughter. And so Crystal says, my 80s fashion was bright colored shorts and tank tops, every color jelly shoe, and when I wasn't barefoot living in Florida. I didn't own jeans until we moved to Missouri in the 90s, product of having a school uniform, I guess, plus you're 0 to 9 years old. So yeah, depending on how old you were, she's like, I had no fashion sense, which is totally cool, which is exactly what kids are like and what kids do. So speaking of throwback, I did go ahead and when I was in Target, I bucked up for the Pepsi Wild Cherry lip balm as well, which is what I'm wearing now. It is what is giving me the shine. And of course, it's got the classic little wild cherry pocket, and Vacation is the brand that did that. So it's an adorable little clip that goes with that and just has a big 80s vibe as well. So if you can't tell, I'm going to try to pick up things and show them off as often as I possibly can. So from here, like I said, the advertising wasn't the only thing on TV. Of course, you know, we had Susie Chapstick, who was also selling us chapstick with all the different flavors. And then Jackie loved her pink jelly shoes. So what was funny is I thought the jelly shoes were fine. I used to get so sweaty in them. So apparently I just have sweaty feet. So instead of doing the jelly shoes, I had like a pair or two, but I didn't really wear them a lot. But I was big on the socks, the leg warmers with the slouch socks, all of those things. So I was very much more a socks and high tops kind of girl. I had Nike high tops, I had Reebok high tops, I had Converse high tops, lots and lots of those, and we'll talk about shoes very soon. Inger says high school and college were the 80s for me. So yes, for me, it was the end of elementary all the way. So I was basically from 10 to 20 in the 80s. And so I was basically a teen in the 80s, and I was a child of the 70s. And so but with my awesome older sister, who's 4 years older than me, I probably got into fashion a little bit faster than most people at my little age of 10, 11, all of that, because she would have all the fashion magazines that she would bring home, and I would look through them and I would think, wow, these are cool clothes. I want to wear stuff like that too. So, and Karen agrees, jelly shoes, I forgot about those. Ingrid says Dr. Scholl's for me now. Doc Martens became very popular. They were expensive, but they would really hold your feet up really well. And so those were very important. And then Crystal says, no, that was a product of jelly shoes and the heel cut from them. So yeah, I was definitely not a fan of them, but they looked really cool. So of course you get them, you figure out how to not be too sweaty in them, although you would kind of steam them up from sometimes. So like I said, with television, it wasn't just the advertising, it was the actual TV shows themselves. How many times did we watch Family Ties or Facts of Life, and we would see how the girls were doing their hair and we would see how they were dressing? Jackie says you were very fashionable. Well, thank you. I started early, didn't I? So, and I had good inspiration. I was watching all of your friends. I was watching all the magazines that you took. So I had some good influence there. And then of course we have more dramatic shows like Dallas and Dynasty and Falcon Crest. And I don't know if you saw, but there was one of the pictures that I posted of me dressing up. I was dressing up for my National Honor Society induction, and I still have the shirt. So as you can see, we've got some lovely puff sleeves here. We have a lovely mock turtleneck here with a little bit of shirring and some edges here. Now, it goes over the head and it buttons up the sides. So this is actually the buttons on the shoulder. And so it would button up the side shoulder. And of course, what is that? A 3/4 sleeve that I see. And what is that? A lovely blue fancy jacquard print. And then Karen also mentions petty loafers. And petty loafers was a cool one because it was one of those kind of throwback things to the 50s and the early 60s that made a comeback. And that's the thing with retro fashion, things come back around again and they feel very 80s. And Jackie says, I remember that blouse. I still have that blouse. So, and then we also had a little subset of cowboy fashion. So right around 1980, John Travolta started an urban cowboy. So wearing a cowboy hat. And it was the beginning of what we call the Coca-Cola cowboy, or the urban cowboy, which is they didn't necessarily had ever set foot on a farm, but they were wearing cowboy boots and they were wearing cowboy hats. And a lot of that came from shows like Dallas, other shows like Dukes of Hazzard that had that southern feel to them. And so wearing those light pale colored jeans, the button down shirts with the pearl snaps, all of those really had their moment in the 80s as well, even though they had other decades. It was pretty big. And then, of course, the big giant puffy sleeves and shoulders. That was big from Dynasty and Falcon Crest. And the sweater. Our sweater games in the 80s were over the top. Like the amount of color that got added, as you can see from some of my pictures. And the Cosby Show was an arbiter of what we know now to this very day as a Cosby sweater. And so that really big, lots of different colors going all the way across the sweater. And let's see, I don't have anything exactly like that, but I did show you a picture of the black sweater that had the sparkles in it. I still have that one as well and wear it occasionally at Christmas time. And then one of the other big TV shows that influenced not only women's fashion but men's fashion big time was Miami Vice. All of a sudden you had men wearing shoes, loafers without socks, wearing pale color suits with with an unbuttoned shirt. And in those very pale, because what a lot of people think is that the 80s was all neon, but no, there was a huge time of pastels, pastel pink, seafoam green, that pale blue, all of those colors were still happening as well. And it was a very Miami, very Floridian kind of a feel to have those lighter, paler colors so you could be out in the sun and it's not so bad. And Inger said, snaps on the Western shirts, that's right, and jeans and boots was me to a T. Exactly. And so it was a look, and for even as functional as it was a look. And then Jackie says, yes, and the ruffles on the shirts. Yes, and so ruffles everywhere, just completely across, up and down arms, everywhere you look. If you could find a place to put a ruffle, it would usually end up there. And then, of course, we were also watching the dance shows. We were watching Soul Train. We were watching American Bandstand to see what the dancers were wearing on the regular and wanting to buy that too. So with that in mind, we talk a little bit about music and everything that influenced that. So country music or modern country music really had a big push forward at that point. Dolly Parton with 9 to 5. Kenny Rogers had a lot of solo hits and duet hits with Dolly. The Judds had just come out and they also had the big fluffy hair and all the ruffles, but they were singing country music. And then, of course, George Strait, Randy Travis, Mickey Gilley, even George Jones was going through a really great time and a very positive move forward with his music in the 80s. Of course, you know, drinking problems being what they are, but we'll skip ahead of that. And then one of the big ones that really influenced fashion was, of course, MTV. Every single video, every single show, within a week of a new video coming out, suddenly people were doing whatever fashion was on there. And so bands like Duran Duran, Culture Club, Pat Benatar, Joan Jett, so many different people, Madonna and Cyndi Lauper, which I've already brought up. So now we also had kind of an R&B and soul influence as well. Now Prince really danced across all the lines. Prince was as much rock as he was pop, as he was R&B and soul. And then you also have Luther Vandross. Patti LaBelle had some of the wildest, most stand-up hair, and it was fantastic. And Chaka Khan had that really beautiful mane of hair as well. And they were giving us some really amazing street fashion kind of looks, which we'll get to more of in a bit too. Now, there was also in the late 70s into the early 80s, there was the punk scene. And of course, punk made its way into fashion as well. So Ramones, they just wore jeans, t-shirts, and leather jackets and tennis shoes. But that whole head-to-toe look came across as very punk. And then, of course, Clash. You'd have like your ripped t-shirts, your safety pin fashion, where you'd rip a shirt and then safety pin it back together. Or you'd put a safety pin in your earrings or put a safety pin somewhere on your jacket. And even though in punk times, they used to put razor blades inside their jacket cuffs, or their jacket collars, so that if people grabbed them, they'd cut themselves. But instead of being a dangerous thing, it turned into a fashion thing. So then you suddenly had pins and little razor blade looking things that weren't necessarily meant to be endangering to a person, but they were meant to look cool and tough. And so, and Jackie said, the guys started wearing parachute pants. Yes, I bring that up in hip hop fashion. And of course, you saw my picture of my lovely teal peg leg parachute pants, and we'll talk a little on those as well. And Cyndi Lauper had the crazy hair, and she was brave enough to do wild colors on her hair. So one day she'd have purple hair, another day she'd have orange hair, and then she would shave the sides, and she had so much fun with colors, with thrift shopping and fashion. And I absolutely loved what Cyndi was able to do. And I took Cyndi's I took Cyndi Lauper's ideas and put them into clothing, but I was a bit of a late bloomer. Like, was a little shy. I'm only like 13 right now. I'm not gonna dye my hair, although there were plenty of people my age that did exactly that. But yeah, and so Clive, that is a scary lore that you didn't know. And that's the other thing is there will come a day well, I will have a separate show just on punk, the rise and fall of punk, and so we'll talk a lot about where it came from, how it came up. It was very much based in London and New York, and London and New York are two huge fashion hubs, and so because of that, that really gritty music then bled into fashion, sometimes almost literally. And so I'm going to have a whole entire separate show on punk, and I hope you'll join me for that one as well. But yeah, there's definitely a few gritty stories that go within that. Now, anyway, with punk, we also had groups like Blondie, and Blondie kind of skipped around from new wave to punk to pop, and she was iconic. The dresses that she wore, the way she would do her hair, everything that she would do, I was always watching. And when she was on American Bandstand, when Debbie Harry from Blondie was on American Bandstand, I about flipped. And then, of course, you had in London, you had the Sex Pistols, and their manager, Malcolm McLaren, ran a fashion shop and was friends with Vivienne Westwood, who is a fantastic designer who kind of got her start in punk and then went into couture. And like people like Gwen Stefani to this very day wears Vivienne Westwood amazingness along with lots of other rock stars. And then also, even though band tees have been a thing since the 60s, it really came up with the brightness and the boldness and the oversized tees that we were wearing. But then punk rock also would wear wearing a Ramon shirt was a big deal. And of course, I have a couple of those myself. Again, once I was able to afford them, it was a few years. So, and then new wave with the new romantic look. So not only were girls wearing ruffles, then boys started wearing those ruffly, piratey, puffy shirts. Those came into fashion with groups like Duran Duran, Boy George. Even the Village People, who were known for their disco, had a moment where they went new romantic and did the fancy makeup and all kinds of things. I know you don't believe me, but feel free to look it up. I don't remember the name of the album, but somewhere in 81 or so, they're like, oh no, we're not disco anymore. We're new romantic. So that's a fun little moment that feel free to dig into Google on that one. And then, of course, pop music. Fashion was everywhere. We had Michael Jackson with the glove and the shiny socks and those red jackets with all the zippers. You had Janet Jackson, his sister, with the huge mane of hair, the button-down look, and so she'd have it buttoned all the way up to the collar and a long sleeve shirt, and it still looked sexy because she was able to pull that off because the lines and the color of black and just everything that she used to set off the fashion to make it amazing. And she was big on the big earrings as well. Madonna, super iconic. She brought lace into fashion. She brought the off the shoulder, the letting the bit of bustier, letting a bit of your lingerie show. Yes, and Jackie says it. Guys wore the ruffled shirts to prom, so they were able to get a little more gussied up as well. Now, at my high school, we didn't really have a lot of guys that wore eyeliner, but I'm telling you, man, when guys put on the eyeliner, it looks cool. When we dressed Steven up as Undertaker and put the eyeliner on him, I was like, hey, that was cool. That's like you're already good looking, but look at what just happened there. So it was intriguing, and so there were a whole lot of guys in my school that were brave enough to do it, but I was always impressed when people were willing to pull that off. And then, of course, layers upon layers upon layers of jewelry. And so, of course, because Madonna would have bracelets, bangle bracelets going all up and down her arms, we had to do the same thing. 10 necklaces all on at the same time, making them look cool. She did crucifix stuff. Of course, I still have from the 80s a set of beads as well. And so these are just little plastic beads that were wrapped in satin. I also have some other black plastic beads and some gray plastic beads. And you would just wear those as a contrast with your fancy sweaters. So which you saw pictures of me doing. I think I had a yellow sweater with red beads. And wearing a bucket hat, because of course. And even though you didn't see the shorts that I was wearing in that picture, they were jams, which is really loud Hawaiian looking shorts that went with that. It was a perfect fit. And then Cyndi Lauper, that we mentioned all before, she did a whole lot of thrift shopping. All of her dresses and most of everything you would see her in were either thrift shopped, or she would sew them, or she had a friend that would sew them. And she was over accessorized, very similar to Madonna. Now, David Bowie has been through lots of different iterations from the late 60s all the way to now. Rest his soul. He was going through a really fun moment where he was doing the oversized suit. Now, we joke a lot about how David Byrne from Talking Heads had the oversized suit, but in the 80s we were playing with sizes and shapes. Even with the most fancy wear that we had, which was the suit, we would go a little oversized, or we would have a little bit more of a different cut. And so the cut of the pants, the cut of the jacket, the cut of the shirt itself would take a different look. And so think Duran Duran. And of course, like I said, David Bowie always had an impeccable look. Even if it was strange, it was still impeccable. And he, at that point, he'd had his hair long, he'd had his hair short, he had it in a pompadour style. So it was a little bit of a throwback to the 50s, but a little bit higher and a little bit crazier. Now, of course, we cannot forget rock and metal. I've already mentioned Joan Jett had a mullet, Pat Benatar had a shorter mullet, and these were all our inspiration. And how many boys had how many mullets? Inger brings up a great one. Adam Ant and David Bowie. They both had the heavy shoulder pads. So they were creating a very triangular look. And Adam Ant, he would do face paint, and he had like military looking buttons that went all up and down. He almost looked like they had just taken Napoleon and threw him into the 80s, gave him crazy hair and crazy makeup and told him to sing rock and roll. And that's how amazing Adam Ant was. And so then, of course, you do have your hair metal, and you're kind of even more into standard metal. So you had Def Leppard and Poison. Then your items, you had Guns N' Roses, you had Iron Maiden, you had Judas Priest, and then you also had the advent of, in rock and roll, what they call the battle vest. And so if you ever see like a big huge metal fan and they have a vest and it's denim or leather and has like all different kinds of patches of their favorite bands on them, that's what's called a battle vest. And it came from motorcyclists, and it came from military men who, when they would come home, they would decorate a jacket with all of that. And so it was almost militant how much metal heads cared about their metal bands. And then Clive says, I love the 2001 Space Odyssey suits. Very modern. And so exactly. And yeah, Jackie says, I think we all had a mullet at one point, 100%. Because really the mullet is just layered. You've layered everything down to where it's longer in the back and shorter in the front. If you go the opposite direction, when people call a reverse mullet, it's just more of that 90s thing where you kind of have the hair hanging in your face and then it's short in the back, which is a whole other style, which really didn't happen as much in the 80s. But yes, you're absolutely right. Short in the front, long in the back, curl it, zhuzh it up, do whatever you do. Pretty sure we did all have mullets. You're right. So then I mentioned this a little bit before, but I want to make sure we touch on it. Hip hop culture. And so the culture of New York City in particular, the graffiti, that was something that all of a sudden we had graffiti shirts. We had graffiti on our jeans. We had a lot of influence on street culture, the boom box, what kind of sneakers you would wear, what kind of jackets you would wear. And one of the big ones for that was Run DMC. Why did we wear Adidas? Because of Run DMC. Why did we wear tracksuits? LL Cool J, we wear Kangol bucket hats, even still to this day, the gold chains. It was just a head to toe look. And so, of course, part of that was the parachute pants. Now, the parachute pants were often used because they wouldn't get scuffed up as much when you were breakdancing, which was a big part of that culture as well. And so you had people that were wearing these parachute pants for protection, but then they also looked cool, covered in zippers that had absolutely no function but just to look cool. Some of the zippers did have pockets under them, but in that pair of pants that I had, I think one had a zippered pocket. All the other zips on there were just for show. And then Inger brings up Kiss. Now Kiss is an interesting one because at the beginning of the 80s they still had their makeup on, and in 1981 I believe it is, they came out with the album Lick It Up, and they premiered their video on MTV, and they premiered their makeupless faces. And I say makeupless faces, it's they took off the clown white and black, and they still had eyeliner, but they finally let everyone see their faces. It was a very big deal. It was a massive premiere. I remember watching it, and I remember where I was. And so, and Jackie admits, yes, I had a breakdancer boyfriend. Hang on. Which one? Who was the Brad? Was it Brad? Was Brad the breakdancer boyfriend? Because I think that might be the case. Let me know if I was right. And so I had a lot of breakdancing buddies. So Shanky Steven even did some breakdancing as well. So there's some film proof of such things. still films, I think, or still photos, I believe. And then of course, yep, I was right. Yay me. It was Brad. Brad was her breakdancer boyfriend. And then Inger says street dancing and roller skating dancing. So that was a cool thing about roller skating. It was kind of in the 70s and kind of in the 80s. And what a lot of people don't realize is everybody seems to think that the second 1980 hit, all of a sudden it was neon everything, and everything just completely changed from bell bottoms to tight pants and all of that. No, it's always been a gradual thing. Like the 50s continued into the first part of the 60s. It wasn't hippie culture until much later. And the same thing happened with the 80s. So roller skate culture really did hang on through the 80s, and we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about arcades and how all of that built into the 80s as strongly as it did. So yeah, we were still roller skating in the 80s, but we were just doing it to different songs, and we were doing it with slightly different styles worn on our bodies. And so definitely part of what influenced the culture as well. Now, one of the other things that we want to talk about is movies. There's plenty of movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High brought us the surfer culture. It brought us that checkerboard look that became very popular in surf and skateboarding as well as roller skating culture. And then Jackie says, yes, roller skate dancing. And Jackie, am I just going to take you out here? Jackie also had a boyfriend that worked at the roller rink. So, which I don't know what it is about Jackie, but Jackie's got connections, I guess. Inger says Xanadu was a lot about the crossover of those cultures. And yes, Xanadu, another really great movie to bring up within all of this. And of course, for hip hop culture, Breakin' and Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo, I went and saw those in the theaters. I think Mom took me and put up with me watching all of that with her around. And of course, the John Hughes movies, the fashion that people like Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall, Emilio Estevez, the stuff that they wore was big. So Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There has been a moment when Stephen and I dressed as Ferris and Sloan. And of course, what did I find? An authentic fringe jacket that is perfect for when I need to be Sloan Peterson, which of course with my hair makes it perfect. Oh, I love that story. Clive says, my parents met roller skating. That is adorable. I love it. And Crystal says, Saturday night was when my friends went to the skate rink. I have always sucked at skating, but whether you sucked or not, you still went to the skating rink, right? Because it was always fun. And so Steven almost never skated. He just went straight to the arcade section. Some people go just to snack and hang with their friends. I did skate my butt off. I would love to get better at skating again, but I kind of miss it. But now that I've lost a little weight, now I'm healthier. I actually did my knee, after my knee surgery, I did training to make sure that I was strong enough to skate. And they put me through 2 extra weeks of physical therapy to make sure that I could. So I do have my own pair of skates. I can't remember if Steven or if Linda helped me find those pairs of skates, but it was pretty awesome. And then Jackie says, LOL, yes, I did. And now he's actually a TikTok star. Yes, actually. So if you've ever, I don't know what his TikTok name is or if he sees this later, but David Cohen is a friend of ours still to this day. He went viral with a hilarious video of him flipping the camera off to a classical song. And from there on, it's been hilarious with him. And then, of course, Inger says the Brat Pack versus the Rat Pack. Yes, I love both, but my high school me loved the Brat Pack. And then Clive says, my parents met roller skating. He fixed the spelling. I knew what you meant, so we're good. And Inger said, I loved roller skating. It was a Friday night regular in high school. And we used to do it on Sunday afternoons. The one of the local clubs, Rotary or somebody, would pile a bunch of us kids into a bus, take us to Higginsville, about 15 miles down the road. We'd go skate for 2 hours for like $1 or $2. It was really great. And then we'd go right back home. And it was a blast. Absolutely loved it. But yes, like I said, this is the jacket that I found at a thrift shop that I wear when I'm being Sloan Peterson. As you can see, like there's a bit of Western theme to that, but there's also an 80s style theme. And let me look at this brand because it's pretty legit. So it's G3 Leather Fashions. So I am not sure what branding that happens to be. And of course it's that low slung, like it doesn't button all the way up, but it buttons just right here across the bottom of it. So very cool. So speaking of, let me go ahead and get this jacket out on show because of course when you wanted to dress, and there were different styles and types that you could dress as, and if you wanted to be preppy, a members only jacket was very important. And guess what? I still have my members only jacket. It is in a shade of white. I actually added, for those of you that are Northwest Missouri State fans, I actually added my little northwest patch of my little Bearcat guy, and you can kind of see right there you've got the pocket, you've got the little collar buttons and everything that goes with it. It zips up the front. And it just hits right at the waist. And so it was a very simple jacket. I've been very fortunate that it hasn't been any more stained, considering that why did I pick a white members only jacket? But apparently that's what I did. And of course, the interesting thing, it has the little epaulettes on the shoulders. So of course, it was just an unusual thing, but it was definitely a fandom. I can verify that. So, and then also, I didn't want to forget, as far as neon, bright colors, big oversized t-shirts, bringing up Wham and George Michael. So the video for Wake Me Up Before You Go Go with the giant letter shirts. I actually still, and I wish I would have brought it. I'll try and take a picture of it this week. I have a shirt that the front of it just has three giant, it's white, and it has three giant black letters. It just says way. And then on the other side it says no way. And so of course we put a whole bunch of funny things. Karen, one of my fellow Bearcats, says go Bearcats. Yes, that's right. And so Clive says, I want new rollerblades so bad. They have new ones with giant wheels and stuff that clip on like ski shoes. That sounds fantastic. I hope you will share pictures if you manage to get that done. I would love to see that. So, like I said, that's movies. Another big part of movies were the glasses. And one of the interesting things is some of the most popular glasses, movies that really brought sunglasses to par, were both Tom Cruise movies. Risky Business, anyone? Now, these were also the type of glasses that Ferris Bueller wore. But these were heavily popularized by Risky Business. They're called Risky Business shades even back in the 80s. Now, they're technically Wayfarers. These are an off-brand. This is not a legit Foster Grant, I believe was the brand that had, and they're very expensive when you get them from actual Foster Grant. But one of the other ones that Tom Cruise was responsible for was Top Gun. And so, of course, wearing a pair of aviator sunglasses was a big deal as well. And so that was one of the movies that brought that into huge fashion. And then, oh my gosh, I love it. Inger says, I sent you a picture of me in my neon letter sweatshirt. I can't wait. If it's okay for me to post it to the Julia Pop page, I would love to post it with your kind permission. And then, of course, we have flash dance. So that's where we chopped up the shirts and had it off center and off the shoulder. And so that was a big part of fashion. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, plenty of magazines that we could read to learn more about fashion, whether that was Vogue, 17. We had a fashion magazine that we could get through home ec departments in junior high, and I actually got them a few of them in high school as well, called Co-Ed magazine, and it was very similar. It was a lot about how to, here's how to do your makeup, here's how to do fashion, here's how to sew something. And so thank you, Inger. Permission has been granted, so I will post that one, a picture of that later on today. And then Inger said aviator shades. Joe wore them all the time. And Inger says permission granted, and Crystal says flash dance vibes. I love it. Yes, and Madonna also did have Ray-Bans as well during Desperately Seeking Susan, yet another movie that then made these glasses very, very popular. So, and so then we have, there we go. And so we had other magazines like 17, Elle, and men actually had a magazine too called Gentleman's Quarterly, aka GQ. So now we've mentioned some of the different color patterns, and I wanted to bring those up. So not only did we have neon, we also had pastels that were very heavily in use at this time as well, especially in the early 80s. And the pastels, we kind of got away from them more in the late 80s. But then we have neon, and then we also have stuff that would sparkle and stuff that was shiny. Like this shirt has got so much shine to it, and that was definitely one of the style choices. Now you probably also saw in my pictures lots of stripes, lots of plaids, aka tartans, lots of paisley, lots of the jelly style shoes and the jelly bracelets and the jelly necklaces, and that particular feel, look, vibe was a very big deal. And then of course I bring up two-tone checks, which was very much a ska kind of thing, very much a new wave kind of thing, and then ended up getting into surfer culture, skate culture, everything. And so it went across lots of different cultures until everybody was wearing them. Loud florals was a very big deal. I know Laura Ashley dresses really started digging in late 80s into 90s, but still the floral vibe was coming up. Now, with street culture, there was also a Pan-African culture that went with it as well. And it was that bright red, yellow, green, black flags of African cultures colors in what they were doing. And it was really amazing to see different bands, different people really feeling proud of their culture by what they were wearing. And Inger brings up Vans. How many people had Vans that had the checkerboard color on them? I've still got an eye out for those. I'm waiting for them to either go on sale or something like that. And Crystal asks, polka dots, or is that more 50s? Polka dots made a comeback in the 80s for sure. They were brighter and crazier, whereas the polka dots of the 50s were a little more black and white, blue and white, navy and white, red and white even. But the polka dots in 80s culture were a lot bigger, wilder, matter. And so they were a bit of a retro, but they were definitely 80s. And in fact, if you got a second, let me see, because with me being right here next to the closet, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're about to find out if I can dig this up. Ha ha! Let's talk about polka dots in the 80s. That's the style of polka dot that was happening in the 80s. And this, of course, is one of my other found shirts. I honestly don't remember. I feel like I found this one at a thrift shop, but I'm not for sure. But again, I saw it. The 80s vibe was just too much for me to even try to keep up with. So that's going to go there with my other fashion. Hopefully you'll enjoy. If it falls down, right? And so Jackie said I had a fuchsia pink polka dot shirt. Yes, which I have a picture of. So fun story about that fuchsia pink polka dot shirt. Jackie and her best friend Amy bought matching fuchsia pink polka dot shirts, wore them for a picture. I was a 7th grader trying to be cool. I grabbed some of my mom's old clothes and was trying to wear them and had a little side ponytail. I was not nearly as cool as they were. Fast forward approximately a year, that pink polka dot shirt is still in the closet. And I now fit into it because I had gotten older by a year and had gotten taller by a year. So I grab it and I wear it to 8th grade, last day of school, with my aviator glasses, with my Pat Benatar mullet. And I look fantastic, and I will definitely post that picture too. And Inger says she had that shirt. This is fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love it when it all comes together. All right. So as far as other styles, we also had denim, your types of denim. So at the beginning of the decade, the denim was definitely dark wash. It was definitely that very dark, deep blue. But by the end of it, we had acid wash. We had distressed wash. I mean, you were pressing your jeans in the early 80s, but by the end, you were trying to hit rocks on them and get them all scratched, scuffed, torn as much as possible. And Jackie said, I think we were going to the Bragg's punk rock party. Yes, indeed you were. And so punk was definitely a style, a type, all of that. And Clive says Twister. Yes. So this is, I love when you guys are chiming in and giving me all of these. You are all the peanut gallery I could ever need. So thank you for that. And then of course, we've already mentioned leather. We've already mentioned parachute pants and how they had zippers everywhere you look. Now we have different shapes that we've already talked about, like tapered pants. Now we also had stirrup pants, and we also had leggings. And so of course, it was very heavy on the top and slim on the bottom. So we were definitely going triangle. And so, and then Inger says, gotta grunge. And so, yes, so late 80s into the early 90s, I mean, the flannel shirts were around at this point, but they didn't explode in the way that they did until late 80s into the early 90s was when all of that went just completely bonkers, which is also a fun one, which we'll also do on one of the shows as well. And so, of course, there were shoulder pads, there were crop tops, there were capris and knickers very early on, very fluffy pants, culottes. And in the early part of the decade, ladies had midi skirts became more popular, but then mini skirts made a comeback by the end of the decade. We definitely had androgynous looks where the boys had fluffier, puffier, rufflier things, and the girls were wearing more menswear fashion. Plenty of that. Let me see if I can get out my ties, because of course I did have ties, and these are both legitimately from my time in the 80s. I had a very loud design on this particular tie, and of course just random little news things as well. And then the pièce de résistance, yes, I do have a piano tie, a skinny piano tie from the 80s, and I've worn it only a few times. It's old, but it seems like it's hanging in there pretty good, and it is the cutest little tie that you probably ever saw. So, yes, skinny ties, definitely a big part of that. And then we had bustiers, we had strapless dresses, we had spaghetti strap dresses. plenty of jackets that I've already showed, denim, tailored, loose, baggy, members only. The long duster jackets, those were a big deal too. I have a picture of my long blue duster jacket that I've already shared with you. I still have that one to this very day as well. So we've mentioned a few things about the different click styles. So when you were preppy, you were wearing Izod, Ralph Lauren, the polo shirt, the layered polo shirts where you had two polo shirts. A lot of people in the 90s think that they originated that. No, it happened in the 80s too. It just kind of went away and came back. Khaki pants, bag waist pants, which is just kind of they're very gathered at the waist, button down polos, ties, sometimes skinny ties, the Armani power suit. Was something that you probably saw Gordon Gekko wear in the movie Wall Street. That's what I'm talking about. Nautical styles such as boat shoes, and you would have even more stripes. And I even had a shirt that had like the little sailor flap on it. I'll see if I can find a picture of me wearing that as well. Very over the top. Like I'm one sailor hat from just looking like a sailor in those outfits. And then, of course, we had the surf culture and the skate culture. And then we have, so that's OP, Body Glove, Hang Ten, Vans, which we've already mentioned, Varney, Stussy, which is the S that people think is a Stussy shirt. Yep, Jackie mentions Ocean Pacific shirts. They were a big deal. Inger mentions collar up. That's right. You pop the collar on those polo shirts. And then we mentioned, as far as punk and new wave, there were other designers besides Vivienne Westwood, like Jean-Paul Gaultier, Mugler, Keith Haring. Now, I had Mom help me make a pair of jeans because I saw Keith Haring used to put graffiti on his jeans, and then he did it for Madonna, and he did it for a whole bunch of other stars. And I was like, that's cool, but I want to do that with my patches. So my mother hand sewed patches onto a pair of jeans, and it was fabulous. You can see a picture of them in the picture where it's me and my three friends, or me and my two friends, Sherry and Corin. We're all kind of sitting on the couch. I have my patch jeans on at that point. We moved those patches to, I think, 2 different pairs of pants because I kept growing out of the pants. And when we did the last one, Mom's like, that's it. And I was like, deal. But she did an amazing job of helping me see my fashion idea through. So, and it was influenced by Keith Haring, one of my favorite artists, God rest him. And then Inger brings up Izod. Yes, absolutely. Definitely one of the brands that was very popular. And then, of course, as far as the ridiculous t-shirts, we would have things here in the Midwest called Surf Missouri, and it looked like they were surfing, like a surfing shirt, but it's a guy on a surfboard and he's surfing through a field of corn. So, and then of course we had the Big Johnson shirts, which got banned at school all the time, and we had the Jams, which were the very colorful shorts, and as long as they came to your knees, you could actually wear them to school. There was a big rule that was in place for our school, and you could not wear Spuds MacKenzie shirts, even though they were very popular in the 80s. They had the little pit bull guy that was named Spuds MacKenzie that sold beer, so you couldn't have Budweiser ads on your shirts in school at the time. No idea what it happens now. And then Dave said, no gur animals. No gur animals. So we had already outgrown all of those. Now, we've covered a few other things. Now, sports culture was also a thing too. So the members only jacket was kind of preppy, but it was also kind of had a sporty look. Mesh tops, sleeveless tops. So you had suns out, guns out, right? Sweatshirts and leather jackets. Those were definitely things that came from sports culture that we wore as part of fashion. And we've mentioned this before. My theory that I have about decades and fashion, we tend to look back about 20 years to the retro idea. So in the 70s, we missed the 50s, so shows like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley came out. In the 80s, we started missing the 60s just a little bit, so a slight return of hippie nostalgia. The Beatles were celebrating 20th anniversaries of release dates, so all that started to come back. So we kicked off the 80s with watching Happy Days, which was reminiscent of the 50s, and we ended the 80s reminiscent of the Wonder Years, which was going through the 60s. So there's kind of like a little 20-year gap there, and we go farther back and we go less, but what I seem to think happens is, what I think seems to happen is it's just every 20 years, once you kind of hit that 20 mark, people get reminiscent of it. Now, we've also mentioned tons of things as far as the hair. Spiky hair, curly hair, perms. I permed my hair a bunch. Crimped hair. We used mousse until it was crunchy. We would back home the hair so we could get that lift that we wanted. There were people that, ethnic hair, you would have jerry curl and fades. Of course, I did the side ponytail because that was really the most 80s thing I could do with my hair. We've talked about the mullet. If you were really punk, you'd do yourself a mohawk. Men were oftentimes clean shaven, with exceptions, Magnum PI being one of them. Of course, he had the stash, and at the time, the Burt Reynolds mustache is called that for a reason, and that was happening in the 80s as well. Of course, we had headbands, barrettes, and ribbons, and hopefully I've got them. Yes, I do. You can make your own barrettes. You had the little double barrette, and you could pick two kinds of ribbon and ribbon that together, and I still have them, and I still wear them every once in a while. It's a lovely purple and lavender, and you could still do those as well. That was more of an early 80s thing. And then, of course, the brands Vidal Sassoon, Rave, Aquanet, Pantene, Don't Hate Me Because I'm Beautiful. And she had the huge mane of hair as well. Oh, yes, and Jackie, of course, is going to be the expert on hairspray. Vavoom hairspray. Indeed. And Inger said so many perms, pink rollers only. And of course, Jackie brings up banana clips, which happened right towards the end of the decade. So you had all that poofy hair and you'd have to clip it up in a little curved banana clip that would clip itself shut in the back. Now, of course, for accessories, we mentioned footwear. In the early 80s, it was things like clogs and flats and Oxfords. And then as we went further into the 80s, we had pumps, we had Doc Martens, we had combat boots, we had creepers, we had cowboy boots. We wore fishnets from time to time as well. We had our leg warmers and our slouch socks. Basically, a slouch socks was just, you could kind of scrunch it down. It was almost like a combination sock leg warmer kind of a thing. And so then, of course, we had all the different brands of sneakers. Adidas, Fila, Puma, K-Swiss, Saucony, Nike. The beginning of Air Jordans was a very big deal. Pony. Reebok had pumps. You had a little button that you could pump up your shoes so that the air would squeeze the shoe closer to your foot. Candies, a very classic style. And they had clogs, and they had slippers, and they had heels, all kinds of brands as well there as well. And then they also brought Velcro. So my Reeboks actually had Velcro on the top. And then, of course, Keds. I've got a picture of me with Keds. Converse has always been coming in and out of style through all the decades, and the 80s was no different. Now, one of the big things that I wanted when I was younger was a Swatch watch. So I had two different Swatch watches. One of them I wore into the ground. This one I still have, and I think I could just get a new battery in it and it would still work. And speaking of polka dots, that's a lovely polka dot one. And then I also got a later one inspired by an artist by the name of Mika. If you know the song, I could be brown, I could be blue, I could be violet sky. The person who wrote that, also a big fan of Swatch watches. So look at, even though this was not done in the 80s, look at how 80s that feels. I just love it. So, of course, I had to get that one. And that is my most treasured Swatch. And then Crystal said Aquanet is what my friend and her sisters use. Yes, it was a big one as well. So for jewelry, we also had our very bold earrings, and men were piercing their ears too. And sometimes you get a double piercing. And then, of course, in the 90s, it went crazy. Crystal can verify on that. We've already talked about our shades. And then finally, we've got hats. So these are some legitimate hats that I got back in the 80s. Apparently, I was a flat cap person. Look at this. It is a distressed flat cap denim. So, and I know we just went past the top of the hour, but I at least want to get these hats shown to you. At some point, I was given this, and this one I think is, yeah, this one's still too small for me, but I could probably turn it into a cute little raspberry beret if I wanted to, even though it's flat cap. I was also a big fan, and I really wanted to get a biking hat for a long time, and so I would oftentimes wear this, and when I was out in the sun I would just pull it down like that so that I had a little bit of cover for my eyes. But yes, I absolutely loved that one. And then the final one, which is pretty beat up, the painter hat in the early 80s was a big deal. Now you'll notice I've got the name of a band here, and that's White Heart, because I did have a Christian band thing that I did a whole bunch, and you can't see it on the brim here, the visor, and it's their signatures, so I got them to autograph it. And so it's pretty beat up, but of course I had to still keep it. So painter hats were definitely a thing more in the earlier 80s than the later 80s, but they were definitely around. So, and people might not realize it, but trucker hats really had a moment in the 80s. They got way bigger in, like, once Ashton Kutcher started wearing them later. And the felt fancy hat, when you'd go to homecoming or anything like that, you would go and wear a fancy hat a lot of times as well. The visor, the bike hat, the cowboy hat, which we mentioned before, and the ball cap. And Amy, welcome as well, and says, yes, yes, Jackie, candies. So that was a very big one, very important one as well. So that has taken us past the top of the hour. I know I tried to make it stop at 8, but we got excited. We got started talking. But I need to make an announcement as to what next week's theme is going to be. And then Amy said, oh my, you have White Heart hat sign. So cool, you still have that. And also, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it quickly enough, probably not. But I also just recently found I have Petra's autographs on just a piece of paper that I'm going to be framing at some point too, and I'll try and show that out. So in the future, so I haven't made the announcement yet, but in the future, I've already mentioned we're going to do a punk show. We're also going to do a Christian rock show and have some fun with that as well. But next week, what is our theme? You might recognize what this theme is because I have been very busy on the weekends. It is Renaissance festivals. Yes, indeed. I've been a performer in Renaissance festivals for coming up on three coming up on 4 years. I've been a regular goer for about 15. Steven's been regularly going since he was in the single digits. So what we are going to do next week is we're going to talk about the history of Renaissance festivals, the stuff you can do at Renaissance festivals, our experiences there. We want to hear your experiences. I know I've been very fortunate to have some amazing friends who perform with me and some amazing friends who attend with me and some amazing friends who've never been. So for all of you, I welcome you to come to next week, Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'm always here. Yes, Inger started going at 11. Inger is also a lifer when it comes to Renaissance festivals. So we are going to have a whole lot of fun talking about that. I'll start posting pictures. And as I said before, I'll post pictures of old themes, new themes, all kinds of stuff. I'll try to get a picture of the White Heart hat. I'll definitely be posting Inger's picture that she shared with her 80s fashion. Feel free to share yours as well. I would love to see you guys do more sharing on my page. But like I said, next week we're going to do Renaissance festivals. Thank you guys for going down memory lane with me and having fun with the 80s. Thank you for joining me in the conversation. That always helps keep me going. I love having a peanut gallery to keep me up and as well. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next week on Julia Pop. And we will definitely have a good time talking about Ren Fest. It will be great. So thanks again, guys. Absolutely love sharing 80s with you because you know I'm a fan.